There's nothing like a Christmas Eve party with your closest friends, right? But what happens when the festive cheer turns into a chilling nightmare? 10 friends thought they were celebrating the holidays, but by the end of the night, they were running for their lives. This story starts in a small college town. 10 friends, all part of the same tight-knit group, decided to throw a Christmas Eve party. The weather was cold, the snow piled high outside, but inside the little rented house, everything was warm and festive. The tree was lit, the music was loud, and the laughter was non-stop. 4 girls, 5 boys, and all the holiday excitement they could ask for. But there was a 10th guest that night, one they didn't invite. Everything started off perfectly. Christmas lights twinkled, drinks flowed, and the group played games in the cozy living room. They didn't notice the small, strange things at first. A misplaced ornament, a candle flickering even though there was no breeze, a faint sound, like footsteps upstairs, even though no one had been up there. As the night went on, things began to get unsettling. The fireplace roaring earlier suddenly went out, leaving the room colder than before. The temperature dropped so quickly that their breath fogged up in front of them. Someone joked about ghosts, but their laughter felt forced. When the power went out, it felt like the house had swallowed them whole. At first, the group stayed calm. They used their phones as flashlights and tried to figure out what was happening. Mike, the unofficial leader of the group, checked the circuit breaker, but everything seemed fine. Maybe it's the storm outside, he suggested, even though the snow had stopped hours ago. The rest of the group huddled together, laughing nervously. Rachel, one of the girls, swore she heard whispering coming from the hallway. Probably the wind, someone said, but deep down, none of them believed it. As the hours ticked by, the strange occurrences became harder to ignore. Anna, the quiet one in the group, pointed out that the Christmas lights were still glowing faintly, even though the power was out. No one could explain it. And then they heard it. A loud bang from upstairs. "Who's up there?" Jason called out, his voice trembling. No one answered. The group exchanged uneasy glances before deciding to investigate. Armed with flashlights and shaky courage, they made their way up the creaky staircase. The upstairs hallway was eerily quiet. At the far end, a single door was ajar, revealing a dark room beyond. The air felt heavier up there, like they were being watched. Sarah, the bravest of the group, led the way. As they entered the room, the first thing they noticed was the cold. It was freezing, much colder than the rest of the house. In the center of the room stood a small antique desk covered in dust. On it lay a worn leather-bound book, its cover marked with strange symbols. "What is this?" Sarah asked, picking it up. The moment she opened the book, the temperature dropped even further, and the door slammed shut behind them. Everyone screamed. "Who's there?" Mike shouted, pounding on the door. No answer. Rachel, clutching her phone, tried to call for help, but her screen flashed with static. Then the whispers started again, louder this time, clearer. "Leave, now." The words seemed to come from all around them, echoing off the walls. Jason grabbed the book from Sarah's hands and slammed it shut. Instantly, the whispers stopped, and the door creaked open. Without a word, they all bolted back downstairs, their faces pale and their breaths ragged. But as they reached the bottom of the stairs, they realized something was wrong. The living room looked different, like it had aged 100 years in the minutes they were gone. The tree was no longer lit. Its branches were blackened as if burned. The presents under it were replaced with what looked like old, rotting boxes. And then they noticed the figure, standing in the corner of the room, shrouded in darkness, watching them. No one spoke as they stared at the figure. It didn't move, didn't make a sound, but its presence was suffocating. The figure seemed to blend into the shadows, tall and thin, with eyes that glowed faintly red. "Is that a person?" whispered Anna, her voice barely audible. Jason, trembling, grabbed the nearest object, a broken chair leg, and held it in front of him like a weapon. "Who are you? What do you want?" he demanded. The figure didn't respond. Instead, the whispers returned, louder this time, swirling around the room like a cold wind. "You shouldn't have opened it." The voices hissed. "You shouldn't be here." The group backed away slowly, huddling together. The room felt smaller, the walls closing in. Mike gestured toward the front door. "We need to get out of here now." But when they turned, the door wasn't there anymore. Where the entrance had been was now a solid wall, cracked and covered in dark stains. Panic set in. Sarah began pounding on the wall, shouting for help. Rachel sobbed quietly, clutching Anna's arm. Jason kept his eyes on the figure, which still hadn't moved. Suddenly, the whispers stopped. The silence was deafening, broken only by the sound of heavy breathing. Then, without warning, the figure took a step forward. "No!" shouted Jason, swinging the chair leg wildly, but it was like trying to hit a shadow. The figure passed through him, and Jason collapsed to the floor, gasping for air. The lights flickered, and for a brief moment, the room changed again. Instead of their cozy living room, they were standing in what looked like a decayed, abandoned version of the house. The walls were covered in scratches, the floorboards rotted, and then they saw it. The same symbols from the book, etched into the walls, glowing faintly. "We're trapped," Rachel whispered. "It won't let us leave." Mike's voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed his fear. "The book. It started when we touched the book. Maybe we have to put it back." "But where?" Sarah asked. As if in answer, the whispers returned, directing their attention to the attic door. It was open again, revealing the dark staircase. Reluctantly, the group climbed back upstairs, each step heavier than the last. The attic was darker than before, the air thick and hard to breathe. The book lay on the floor where they had dropped it, but now it pulsed faintly like it was alive. Mike picked it up, his hands shaking. "What do we do with it?" Before anyone could answer, the attic door slammed shut behind them. The whispers turned into screams, filling their ears with an unbearable noise. The room began to shake, dust and debris falling from the rafters. And then they saw her. In the corner of the attic, a figure began to take shape. Not the shadowy presence from before, but a woman. Her face was pale and sunken, her eyes hollow. She pointed at the book, her mouth moving silently. "Put it in the chest," Anna screamed, pointing to the old wooden box they had found earlier. Mike didn't hesitate. He threw the book into the chest and slammed it shut. The moment he did, the screaming stopped. The air cleared. The attic was silent once more. The group stumbled downstairs, their bodies shaking from the ordeal. The house was back to normal. The tree was lit again, the decorations were untouched, and the front door was where it was supposed to be. They didn't say a word as they left, stepping out into the cold night air. Snow fell softly around them, but the chill they felt wasn't from the weather. As they walked away, Rachel glanced back at the house. Through the window, she thought she saw the faint outline of the woman watching them leave. They never spoke about that night again, but every Christmas Eve they all had the same dream, a cold attic, a screaming voice, and a book that should have stayed closed. Think that was scary? You won't believe what happens in the next story. Hit subscribe so you don't miss it.